It's a parent's job to nurture them and teach them everything they know. But sometimes, children are stripped from their homes. Might have been a worker just trying to do their job, or they might have just found themselves sitting outside of somebody's doorstep. Or sometimes, they can be just in their room, in the dead of night, just sleeping peacefully, when all of a sudden, it happens. "You're not even allowed to be here," the man said. "Just go home before I call the cops." As the woman's heart filled with rage, she screamed at the top of her lungs. And this wasn't uncommon for the little girl, and as usual, she just had to force herself to sleep. But little did she know that that argument would spark a chain of events that would eventually land her sitting in the backseat of a police cruiser. In the late 1980s, a baby was born by the name of Bonnie Lohman. And Bonnie was born into a less than perfect situation. It was the parents that fell out of love type. The only time when the two actually seemed happy was when they were interacting with little Bonnie. But interacting with each other would be like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. Just not a good idea. Now Bonnie would have been too young to understand any of this, but if we go back, we'll find that the two actually used to get along pretty well, and were excited when they found that little Bonnie was on the way. This would lead us to a man who we'll just call Jack. Jack needed to find a job, so he was excited when he got the call to start working. But while he was at work, he had noticed something. It was almost as if every time he looked up, he would catch this pregnant lady just staring at him. She would quickly look away after being caught, but Jack knew something was up. So while Jack was on his lunch break, he sparked up a conversation with her, and quickly, the two hit it off and became friends. But it was beyond obvious that this wasn't going to be just a platonic relationship. Now why this is relevant is because this woman was already married. And when the baby that she was carrying was born, she decided to name her something calming. So she picked the name Bonnie. Yeah, what she was doing was wrong. But when she saw Jack, there was something that just changed within her. It was as if the part of your brain that tells you what's right and what's wrong was just shut off. It was just her and Jack being free, doing what they want, when they want, having zero regrets, and just living in the moment. So this woman, we'll just call her Kim. Kim was now living a double life, one with her husband and one with her new boyfriend. Little Bonnie was born, and her life brought her parents newfound joy in moments that were unforgettable. But Kim had grown more and more short-tempered with her husband, who we'll just call Mark. It was as if he couldn't do anything right, and the two would argue constantly. And when this happened, she'd usually take Bonnie and go to her mother's house, who had lived only 30 minutes away. Now usually, Mark would give her time to just cool off, knowing that eventually she'd come back. It may take days, sometimes weeks, but she'd always come back. And while he was laying in bed, he got this urge to try to do something to fix his marriage. So it's about 2 a.m. He gets up, gets his car keys, gets in his car, and just starts driving. He had no idea what he was going to do or say. He just knew he wanted to do something. But when he got to the house, he was kind of confused because he didn't see her car. Now she had drove a bright red sedan, but all the cars on this block were either black, white, and some gray, but no red. So he was confused, but he didn't panic. And in order to not startle anyone in the home, he just in a gentle tone said, "Don't worry, it's just me, Mark." Now Kim's mom was known for staying up late watching TV in her living room, and one episode led to another, and before she knew it, the sun was coming up. So when she suddenly heard a knock on her door at 2 a.m, She was frozen with fear. But when she heard who it was, she calmed down and went to go answer the door. But she was shocked to see Mark, and even more shocking was that he was asking if Kim was there, because she hadn't seen her daughter in months. But when she explained this to Mark, it was as if something changed. He just said, "I'm sorry for coming over, enjoy the rest of your night, and I think I know what's going on." So he got in his car, stayed completely silent, and began driving. When he walked through the door, he just went straight to his bedroom, reached under the side of his bed, and pulled out some papers. And with the papers in his hand, he then walked back into the living room, sat on the couch, and eventually fell asleep. The next morning, he woke up to a silent home, but that was fine because he was willing to wait. And the next day, he heard someone opening the front door. This was Kim. She was holding little Bonnie in her arms and was shocked to see Mark sleeping on the couch. It was just bizarre, but she shrugged it off and said good morning, and the two began talking. But at some point, Mark suggested for Kim to lay Bonnie down in her crib because he wanted to talk about something serious, so she did. And when she came back, Mark began talking, but it was kind of strange because he never actually looked at her. He was just staring down at these papers in his hand. And eventually, Kim looked over and saw that they were divorce papers. "Who are those for?" the woman said. And Mark would explain that he wanted a divorce. And at this, Kim was shocked, confused, and humiliated. She thought he must be kidding. But then, Mark simply said, "I know about your mother's house." Kim ignored him. She just went straight to Bonnie's room, grabbed her baby, and left out the front door. But Mark didn't worry because he knew she'd come back. This wasn't the first time he had tried to divorce her, claiming that he knew she was cheating on him. But this time, Mark would speak with a divorce attorney and said that he would go for full custody over little Bonnie, but was told that the odds of him getting the child would be slim to none, unless he could provide evidence of her being a bad mother. When suddenly, he got an idea. He just picked up his phone and started dialing. And again, he heard those doors open. There she was, Kim, with little Bonnie in her arms. He did whatever he could to make her enraged, and no time later, she was furious and bolted out the front door. She couldn't believe him. He was just being so confusing. But when she started driving, there was a man in a black vehicle that started following her. She turned down an unfamiliar road and went into an unfamiliar neighborhood and stopped at an unfamiliar house with a blue pickup truck parked in the driveway. And when the man opened the door, he ended up getting a little too friendly with the married woman. The man wrote down the address, started his vehicle, and drove off. When he got back to Mark's, he told him everything he saw and where she went. Because if things got ugly, he would have to know her location. But when Mark brought up the fact that Kim would disappear with little Bonnie for days and sometimes weeks at a time, he had the case won. To this point, Mark had missed almost a whole year of his daughter's life due to her being out so much. But she was turning 3 soon, so he wanted to do something special. They got breakfast, went to the park, drove around the city. I mean, you got the cake, you got the ice cream. It was just the best day in the world for a child. But the sun was going down, and the little girl was all tuckered out. So he picked her up, put her in the back seat, and began driving. And soon enough, the little girl was sound asleep. But when he turned into his neighborhood, he saw something that he wished wasn't real. It was a bright red sedan, parked right outside his house. Kim wasn't even supposed to be there, but she was kind of known for doing whatever she wanted. And with his kid in the back seat, he had no choice but to turn into his driveway. When he parked his car, he picked little Bonnie up out of her seat and began walking to the front door. And when he opened the door, he just walked straight to Bonnie's room and gently laid her in her crib. He took a moment to just breathe and then went back into his living room to fix a problem. Kim was now sitting on the couch because when Mark parked his car and picked Bonnie up, Kim was shouting at him, but she couldn't believe that he was just ignoring her. And so when he walked through the front door, she followed in after him. But when she noticed that he was walking straight to Bonnie's room, she just decided to sit on the couch and wait because this is what Mark always would do. If there was going to be an argument or a fight, he would either put Bonnie in her room, completely ignore the situation, or take Bonnie out for a ride in the car and listen to music. He just felt like parents shouldn't fight in front of their kids. But now the kid was asleep, and Kim had nothing but time. The two went back and forth for a while, and Kim shouted as little Bonnie woke up out of her sleep. But this wasn't unusual for the little girl, so she knew she just had to force herself back to sleep. "You're not even allowed to be here," he said. "Just go home before I call the cops." As the woman's heart filled with pain, she broke down crying. And through broken speech, she said, "You made me miss her birthday." Mark saw something he hadn't seen in a long time. She was no longer speaking from a position of dominance, but from vulnerability. He was now simply just in the presence of a woman that was in pain. She tearfully begged to stay the night, saying she'd just sleep on the couch and be out in the morning. Now you can judge him all you want, but he agreed. And so completely exhausted from the day he had, he went straight to his room and quickly fell asleep. The next morning he woke up completely exhausted and kind of stumbled into the bathroom to splash some water on his face. And as much as he wanted to just get right back in bed and go to sleep a few more hours, he knew Bonnie would be up soon, so he had to start making breakfast. And so he makes the food, and he kind of decorated it so that it would look like a smiley face. And when it was just right, he grabbed a plate and began walking to Bonnie's room. But what he saw was terrible. He just ran to the phone and dialed 911. Kim woke up a little more depressed on this day. It was Bonnie's birthday, and she just wanted to feel close to her. So she got in her car and drove to the park. She saw the swing that she would push Bonnie on, and all these memories began flooding her thoughts. When she found herself driving in the neighborhood that Bonnie lived in, she just wanted to feel close. And before she knew it, her car was parked right outside Bonnie's house. But there was no car parked in the driveway. And so she just sat there for hours and hours. And eventually she fell asleep, but was awoken to some bright headlights shining into her car. She was gonna turn her car on and just drive away, but when she saw Bonnie in Mark's arms, just sleeping peacefully, she couldn't help herself. She got out and tried to get his attention, but was ignored, and this filled her with rage. So when he walked through the front door, she followed in after him, but she knew this is what he would always do, so she didn't leave. Instead, she just sat and waited. Moments later, Mark came back. "What is it this time?" he said, and she asked about the kid, and the two began talking. And at some point, they began to talk about their relationship and where it went all wrong. And of course, Mark brought up the affair, and at this, Kim shouted. But after some time of going back and forth, Mark had enough and just said, "You're not even allowed to be here. Just go home before I call the cops." And this filled her heart with pain. He had become so cold. She just said through broken speech, "You made me miss her birthday." She would beg to spend the night, saying she just wanted to feel close to her daughter. And shockingly, he agreed and went off to sleep. But after a while, she realized she didn't have a blanket. She tried to sleep without one, but she just couldn't. And all the blankets were inside the master bedroom. Now she said she wouldn't bother him, but she kind of had no choice. So she opened the door. It was just so loud. But surprisingly, Mark was still asleep. She opened the closet, and there it was, her blanket. But it was underneath all this stuff. So she reached and tried to pull it out gently. But of course, everything fell all over her, and she just knew she woke Mark up. But still, he must have been extremely exhausted. She put everything back, and with her cover in hand, began leaving the room. But then she stopped to look back, and sure enough, sound asleep. And so she was walking through the hallway, but when she got to Bonnie's room, she couldn't help herself. So she opened the door and just looked at her sleeping. But she just wanted to feel closer. So she put her blanket down and picked her up. And when she did, all these memories began flooding her thoughts. And no time later, she walked out the room, closed the door behind her, and walked out to her car. And with Bonnie in the back seat, she just began driving. When she got to Jack's house, she just said, "I had to do it. I just had to. She's my kid. Now are you gonna help me or not?" and for some odd reason, he actually agreed. The couple quickly packed their bags and drove to the airport. He couldn't believe it. She did it again. But this time, felt a little different because he had full custody, so this was actually an abduction. He just called the cops and told them where she was. But when the cops got there, nobody was home. Little Bonnie was now a missing child. But in the 1980s, missing children cases were handled very differently, mostly because there was no such thing. Only missing people, a child, an adult, didn't matter. It was all the same. And the protocol for a missing person is to wait 3 days before you can actually declare them missing. But by that time, little Bonnie would have already been on a plane out of the country and living in a remote shack with her mom and new stepdad. He was devastated and was constantly thinking of what he could do when he noticed on his milk carton there was a picture of a missing child. Now, there was no Amber Alerts at this time, so trying to spread the word of an abduction proved challenging. But how missing kids' pictures ended up on the side of milk cartons is because in the early 1980s, a boy named Eugene was abducted, and one of Eugene's relatives had worked in a dairy and thought instead of putting advertisements on the side of milk cartons, they should put missing children. But the amount of children that go missing a year is a staggering number, and each child would need a fair amount of time with their face being shown. So there was a wait list, but when days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, over time, Mark would begin to lose hope. Little Bonnie's life did a 180. She went from always out with one of her parents to living in a remote shack, under strict rule that she was never allowed to go outside. A year later, she moved to Hawaii, where she got to go outside maybe once or twice, and where a 5-year-old would have been going to school and learning how to read and write, and even making friends. Little Bonnie was stuck in a house with no form of education. After a year in Hawaii, they moved back to the States and settled in Colorado, where things were more relaxed. She got to go out more often and even made a friend. And if she was really lucky, her stepdad would take her to the grocery store with him, which was her favorite place. There was so much food, toys, and candy. And if she was really good, she could even take something home. It would have been her equivalent to going to Disneyland. But when they got to the dairy section, Jack had noticed something. He just grabbed the milk carton and showed her. "Look, it's you. You're famous. Want to keep it?" And of course she said yes. And what he showed her was a picture she took 4 years ago. And in big letters it said, "Missing." But because she had no form of education, she couldn't read. So when the carton was done, he went to go throw it in the trash, but stopped. Now, some speculate that he did this out of guilt for helping imprison a little girl, but he ended up cutting out the picture and giving it to the girl. Now, he told her to keep it in a safe spot and to never let anyone find it. But a few days later, Bonnie was hanging out with her neighbor when she forgot her Barbie case inside the room. And when a woman found it, she picked it up, but something fell out. It looked like a picture, but when she saw who was in the picture, it completely startled her, and she immediately called 911. A while later, there were all these police sirens and cops outside her house, but they were just there for her neighbors, because what she saw in that picture was Bonnie. But the thing that scared her was how young she looked, and written in big letters was the word "missing." The scene was chaotic. She didn't know what was going on, when all of a sudden, a police officer walked up and just said, "You need to come with me." Her stepdad didn't say a word, but her mom was kicking and screaming. They drove the girl to a police station, where they got in contact with her father. He couldn't believe his ears. After 4 years, they actually found her. He just got in his car and drove straight to the airport. Bonnie had no idea what was going on. They just kept saying she was a missing person. And now she was on a plane headed to an unknown location. And when she got off the plane, a man greeted her with open arms. But she didn't know who he was. She just got in the backseat of the car, but was very uncomfortable. And Mark, realizing the situation, decided to play a song. Because when Bonnie was a baby, music would always help calm her nerves. When suddenly, she heard a familiar tone and just felt this wave of pure bliss take over her body. And I think little Bonnie knew that everything was going to be just fine. When she stepped foot in her old home, there was this sense of belonging. And Mark would learn over time that she couldn't read or write, but eventually, she got the hang of it. She would begin to get more and more comfortable with her new life. It would begin to open up about her old one. And when Mark realized that she was basically a prisoner, he would try to give her more freedom. She could now play outside as long as she wanted, which was until the traffic lights came on. But he gave her freedom in his own way.